Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, capital markets analyst and host of your cannabis business podcast. Today, we've got Simone Cimiluca-Radzins. She's the CEO of Kalogia, a CPA, living in France. You're a California native, though. Is that right?
Portland native, but lived in California long enough to call it home.
All right. Well, welcome to the podcast. We're going to be talking about all things California today. Let's just jump right into that. There's an article from the MJ Business Daily that says that California wholesale marijuana flower prices are holding steady on the lack of licenses and growing demand. So there's a nice little chart here that kind of shows the wholesale cannabis prices in California. Indoor prices are going as much as $2,200 per pound right now, current. We'll see if that stays there. So growers are reporting pounds of wholesale cannabis flower going for $2,200 indoor versus outdoor at $1,100. And there's a quote here that says, "Things are going great." Is that steady? Is that something that somebody can rely on like 2 years from now?
No. In 2 years from now, we have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, hopefully, so California 2020, we still are seeing a lack of retail licenses, right? We're still seeing that. One of the major cities, Los Angeles, still hasn't issued enough retail licenses to really understand where that market's heading. And we were talking about this earlier. Cannabis is a commodity. You know, looking at $2,200 a pound at a wholesale wholesale price for premium indoor is really, really expensive. That number I would anticipate to go down. It was, down a few years ago. If you compare it to other states and where they would be in the market of maturity, that number I would expect to see way less in a few years.
Yeah, just looking at Washington State's Petri dish experiment, you can see prices were really high in every state, actually, every state that rolls out, with the exception of Nevada because of the monopoly on retail stores. Price per gram is always really high, like $30. And then I always say look at $4.20 as your future low price point for the discount retailers. So for example, $4.20 in 2018 is probably today's everyday low price at Uncle Ike's, which is a local low budget retail store. So that's my experience. I do 20 stores on $4.20. I take a look at what everybody's doing and then report on that. And consistently I've been seeing that, down the road, those are where the trends go. Very similar to California leading the trend with cultivars. So a popular strain in California will hit Denver about 6 months later, and then a year after it becomes popular in California, Washington State picks it up.
Wow.
Wedding cake, for example.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think that, even when you think about the price currently of what it is at, we also have to realize that the cultivators in California they have a cultivation tax, right? Not taxed upon the price that they're selling on the wholesale market, but taxed upon the weight that they're selling. So even thinking about when a cultivator is selling to a distributor, there perhaps is a reason why that number is a little bit higher, just for them to cover their own costs. Mm-hmm. Right? Where in other states like Colorado, you don't have that tax.
So Colorado and California, I think, are very similar with the sense that they have vertical integration. Yes. So there's a quote here that says it's going to be very challenging for anyone who doesn't have their own cultivation or dispensary. Washington State doesn't have that. And it's probably one of the most competitive spots in the entire North America, I'm going to say, because just north of Seattle, there's 20 stores within 5 miles, and some of them share the same parking lot. They're literally right next to each other, and there's nothing that differentiates them. So in Washington, we can't own our own grow and packaging, so our processing facility. The retailer is completely separate. So is there an advantage for California and Colorado's model of vertical integration? Have you seen that brands and products are able to survive better?
Well, in working with some of my clients, I'd say there's only 1 or 2 vertically integrated companies. And then the other ones have chosen, okay, no, I'm going to do manufacturing and I'll do self-distribution. So they could kind of manage their own. I think just because of, again, I don't know why, maybe because I like to think big, but when I think of vertically integrated company, I think of a company that's trying to kind of gross more than 10 million in revenue a year, not like a small micro business. California has this micro business license that allows a company to do cultivation, a distribution, and a retail. But if a company was big enough that wanted to not do the micro license, they would actually have to go get each of those license types. Mm-hmm. California has a distribution model very similar to alcohol. And so one of the areas where I think a lot of companies may fail within the next few years if they try to bite off way more than they could chew. Right? If they were, because if you are vertically integrated and you decided to also work with other businesses in California, the distributor is the source of tax collection, both from the excise tax at the retail level and the cultivation tax. So a company that is vertically integrated in California has to really focus on compliance, has to focus on their numbers, in addition to doing what they need to do in running a business. So yes, it's a great model in Colorado. It's a much smaller state than California. And even in one of the articles that you shared, there's with some of the businesses that have been going under, they've actually started closing down some of their facilities, right? So there was a larger company, I believe it was Suniva, that decided to close down their distribution and only focus on cultivation because I think they've realized, wow, we are doing a little too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with that distribution model. There's kind of a dichotomy within the industry that some people believe that it'll be the cannabis specific distribution model that survives, and then others think that the traditional model of alcohol and food distribution would just kind of come in, grab that, and then do its thing. I'm not sure which way, but I think that the ones that are going to survive are the ones that aren't touching the plant. The producers, if you're looking at Oregon, which we'll get into, because I want to compare California prices with Oregon. But before we do that, just looking at California and the potential bloodbath, this article says potential business carnage coming out of California marijuana industry. Stability might emerge after that. Again, I like to say time will tell. So California cannabis bloodbath 2020 has begun. So there's a lot of people that are going to run out of operating capital this year, predicted Andrew D'Angelo, co-founded the Oakland retailer Harborside. So he says that there's going to be a lot of assets out there at a discounted price in 2020. Several insiders noted that because of many California cannabis companies that don't have funds to keep doing business as usual, nor the option of declaring bankruptcy since it's a Schedule 1. So the upshot is that there's a well-heeled investor that can gain a foothold in the largest cannabis market in the world. So according to Seattle-based cannabis analytics firm Headset, 2019, the California market saw just under $3 billion in adult use sales, nearly doubling the legal marijuana sales the year prior. So 2020, according to the Marijuana Business Daily projections, the adult use market will grow by approximately 50%, eclipsing $4 billion. And then they think that it's going to hit $6 billion in 3 years. So this is interesting. BDS Analytics thinks that California is going to overtake the legacy market by 2024.
The legacy market?
The black market.
I call it the illicit market. By 2024? Well, I think so. 2020 election year. Who knows who's going to win? Hopefully somebody that I want. And will cannabis legalization be something that happens? I've always said by 2023, federal legalization in the United States will be something. And so if that's the case, implementing federal regulation, who knows how that would even happen? By 2024, if enough states are actually working out their kinks, I don't know. The illicit market is pretty big. I think that the illicit market, probably it would be 2028 or a little bit later, just because the infrastructure has been around for decades. I don't think that's, I would say, no, I think it's going to be a few more years. I think that federal legalization will happen by 2023. That implementation of regulation will take quite some time. And then within that time, even by 2023, we've got 3 more years of building the THC and building the cannabis brand for the consumers, hopefully increasing the percentage of Americans who are in support of cannabis legalization from 67% in 2017 to 75%. And so then if that's if that's one step. The second step is what California is seriously facing is the illicit market. Consumers are going and buying cannabis unbeknownst to them in an illicit shop. They have no idea that it's an illicit shop, yet they're still buying it. And so the BCC, the government regulatory body in California, they've been doing raids, they've been doing like all this like marketing and PR, QRX codes and all that stuff, but they still have a lot of work to do to educate the 39 million people that live there.
Yeah, I'm buying pounds for $500 in Washington State, and until people kind of come on board with those prices. We're kind of seeing retail prices in Oregon $30 to $40 after harvest season, or 420 sale prices. The two top purchasing decisions for consumers is price and convenience. Until cannabis is normalized, until the prices come down to reality, people are going to continue to look to what fits their budget, or what's normal. If I'm used to dealing with my medical marijuana provider, then that's where I'm going to continue to go. Canada is a perfect example of 10 milligram caps on edibles. Like, you're never going to see me going into a store and buying an edible in Canada. I went up there for the Lift Expo with a friend of mine. She's an angel investor and attorney, and she walked into an illicit store by accident. Didn't even know that wasn't even legit, So it's out there for sure. But in order to bring the prices down, you have to have a lot of people go out of business first in order to take that market share from the illicit market, because it's all about price and convenience. And right now, at 10 milligram caps and $300 ounces, forget about it.
Yeah. Well, not only that, Josh, but January 1st, 2018, when a consumer went into their favorite dispensary in California, they saw this huge increase in just the same exact product because of all the taxation. So I think it's like the illicit market continues to exist because the tax structures are so high.
Yes.
In California, right? And like that to me is like, until we fix that illicit market will continue to thrive.
So those taxes are going to be a huge burden. Labor is a number one expense. As a CPA, you know that you can't write off that on cost of goods sold for labor. For cannabis, CBD, you can. So the quote says that it's all predicted on how much cash you have. If you have it, 2020 is going to be the greatest year. If you don't, 2020 is going to be a miserable year. So there's some investors on the sidelines. They're looking for value, right? And so they're not going to be throwing it into a regulated market like California, knowing, having seen all these other launches, that there's going to be a massive amount of regulatory changes. And what better way to just sit back and watch some of these companies fail, or at least not succeed, and come in and just buy them out. We've seen that in Washington. $1 million put into a grow facility in Vancouver, right next to Portland, and then they weren't able to grow a single gram and just had to sell their license.
Wow. I was even reading an article, I'll send it to you, just about, because more than 70% of the counties in California still do not allow cannabis, right? Any form of cannabis commerce. And so there's this one county, Nevada County, very small county. They predicted 220,000, this county, in tax revenue. They've only collected 6,000 in tax revenue. So there's just this, because the companies actually weren't selling, right? So they were still trying to build, they were still dealing with so many probably issues of build out, mold, not knowing how long a growth cycle takes, all of those things that any cultivator might experience. And so they're not even seeing it. And so that actually couples the issue. I mean, it almost magnifies the issue, because then that county is not seeing it. So then another county is like, oh my gosh, do we really want to do it? Are we going to see tax revenue? It's just, I've said it a few times, I need to think of a new word, but bonkers, right? It's a multi-layered problem. And I do agree, cash flow is definitely queen in this next year for cannabis operators, because, in California, I believe this is probably true in every state, but if they do not pay their cultivation tax or their excise tax, they might not be able to renew their license, right? So then, when you think about, okay, I've got cash, what do I have to do? Probably not, as an owner of the business, hopefully you do take your salary, but first you're paying off your debts, you're paying off your vendors. Cultivators, especially in California, because of the distribution and the distribution terms between distributors and cultivators, might have made that sale, might have made that revenue, move that quantity of cannabis, and have that liability for the tax that they owe the state, but they haven't received the cash yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some producer processors and retailers in California that don't want to renew because of the $2,500 fee. So
Yes.
that's not a lot of money.
That's not a lot of money though,
So
right?
it's going to be a little rough.
Yeah.
Washington, on the other hand, I think is starting to come full circle. So we're seeing an uptick in Washington state wholesale cannabis flower prices because of businesses closing. So that pendulum is looking like it's starting to swing. Some companies aren't even using the full canopy because there's just not enough demand. They're not using it. So we're starting to see an uptick, like $1,800 for a pound of premium indoor.
Yeah.
I don't know who's buying that. I go into stores and I look at ounces, and I'm not seeing premium ounces at $300-$400 that I would buy.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure who's doing that. So outdoor is only $340. So by comparison, like, why would you spend $1,800 when you can buy, $3,400 and then roll a joint with that, or pre-roll or whatever?
Well, right. And I think that's the interesting thing that I wish some of these studies would look into is, okay, so we are going to buy outdoor, we're going to buy outdoor trim, or are we going to buy indoor and make an edible, right? I mean, when you think about if I'm a manufacturer, oil might be a little bit different, but if I'm a manufacturer making amazing gummies, yes, I definitely need to know what strains would help and all of that. But wouldn't I be incentivized to probably get the cheaper of the flower? Right. And I just find that interesting of when you actually kind of start dissecting where, I mean, flower still is predominantly what people are wanting. I think it's more than 50%, but then you think about edibles and infused products really coming close, or at least growing. I guess coming close is a little bit of an overstatement, but thinking about the input cost for those companies, why wouldn't they be incentivized? They can increase their margins by using an outdoor, a mixed light, like in California.
So a couple of reasons for that recent increase in Washington state prices.
Yeah.
Washington state has experienced an oversupply challenge for several years. Wholesale flower prices were once the lowest in the country. The market has experienced an increase in prices in the recent months for several reasons, including smaller operators have gone out of business because the market was too competitive and profit margins were unfavorable. Second is that prices at rock bottom. There's some licenses that chose not to grow cannabis at all, driving down supply. And then the poor weather conditions that we had here, including summer that wasn't very good, overcast, frost. And then in the fall, for some cultivars that take a longer time to flower, we had early rains. And so a lot of those crops got decimated. So it is maybe a little bit of economic supply and demand, but just too many people in the industry. Initially, you're not going to see 1,400 tomato farmers in any given state. And so comparing tomatoes, which is one of the crops to look at as a comparison to cannabis, because it's one of the only commodity or agricultural crops in a grocery store grown predominantly by small farmers. The rest of them, potatoes or whatever, huge farmers, right? But there's a co-op of tomato farmers, and they're majority small farmers. So it does work. You can do a tier 1, tier 2 small producer of cannabis and produce good quality product, but you're going to have to follow that model. And it's going to take some weeding out of these, 1,400 in Washington. And we haven't even gotten to Oregon yet. Oregon and then Oklahoma. California can look and see what's going to happen with these other states that have been leading the way in terms of oversupply. So this article says that most of the people have been forced to close their doors because of the commodification that we've seen. People are not willing to walk away. Like I said, they're altruistic. They don't want to not be in the industry helping people. So there's a guy from Puffin Farms, a local producer processor. He said yields were down 20 to 30% from a normal year because of the extended rainy, overcast, cool weather from June through August, and some plants only reach half the size of normal growth. So weather conditions maybe, but I mean, move indoors, get a hoop house, do what you need to do. Oh.
Yeah, I think weather conditions definitely affect kind of the price. And it's interesting because the price went up from 2019 in Washington, right? Like the outdoor price was 227 compared to 340. And so that makes sense when the supply curve kind of shifts. But yeah, if there's a number of businesses that are not seeing a return, then they're leaving. They're leaving the market. And so then those suppliers actually, I mean, the supply curve actually just shifts in itself.
So Oregon is seeing an increase as well. So Oregon is well known for having a 6.5 year supply. I think there's 1 billion joints, I think is the equivalent
Yeah.
of how much they have. And that's just from an overproduction, too many licenses. So prices went from $1,800 in 2019 to $2,400 for high quality indoor. So those prices are obviously up. Growers in Oregon are reporting that there's a low barrier to entry to grow cannabis in the state. City overproduction drove the market to rock bottom lows, but prices have begun to rebound for the following reasons. There's a rash of growers that have gone out of business because the market was lucrative enough and decreased the supply. And then other licensed producers haven't utilized their full canopy growth or capacity because the market was too unfavorable. And then most cannabis growers have pivoted to hemp, seeking opportunity in the CBD market, which is unfortunate because all of these individuals in Oregon who switch from cannabis to hemp are going to be decimated by the 600,000 pounds that California was expected to cultivate in 2019 alone. And I don't think even Oregon is aware of how much CBD is being grown in California.
Oh, wow. I actually didn't know that. And then I was even thinking, I mean, I'm curious in the United States how much hemp is actually bought from overseas sources, right? So then Oregon also would be competing with, I mean, yes, it's Oregon grown, but also competing, yes, with California, which would just completely, you're right, decimate, but other sources as well. And I find it, I mean, when you think about it, like the premium indoor price for Oregon, it's $2,400 wholesale right now. You compare that to the high in California at $2,200, which just 2 years ago in Oregon, like we said, it was like rock bottom. People were going out of business left and right. There was so much Oregon cannabis that was in California that was literally, I just remember like it was lab tested cannabis, like that it had to kind of move. I'm a bit shocked, honestly, to see that big of an increase year over year. I mean, okay, I can understand. I don't know off the top of my head how many cannabis licenses were in Oregon, but even if, let's say, 25% shifted to hemp, that's still a huge number, a huge increase in the price.
Absolutely. $300
Right?
last year per pound in Oregon. So the increase is a result of many operators not making it through the toughest times of the oversupplied market. If you walked into Starbucks or the mall, let's say you're buying a pair of jeans and it went up, 300%. If your coffee all of a sudden was $20, that would be a market moving news PR. It'd be all over the place. But here it's kind of like this commodity is going up and down. And so cultivators are being cautioned that the new markets of oversupplied situation and rock bottom barrel wholesale prices are happening in Oregon could likely happen elsewhere. We're talking you, California. And so I want to compare Oklahoma because I think Oklahoma is kind of following suit with Oregon in terms of how many licenses they've had. So many medical marijuana dispensaries have opened in Oklahoma, slashing prices to stay competitive. So the downward pressure on cannabis prices have some dispensaries in Oklahoma fearing that their future, even as they brace for more possible business challenges that could result in the state enacting more regulations and testing and labeling. So here's what you need to know about the Oklahoma medical marijuana market. At its height, the wholesale price of cannabis flower was $4,000 a pound, which dropped between $1,000 and $2,800 today. So Oklahoma's medical marijuana market launched in October of 2018, only a few months after voters approved it. And Marijuana Business Daily estimates that the medical marijuana sales in the state were about $345 million last year. Under Oklahoma's liberal licensing policy, the state has issued more than 2,000 dispensary business permits, and the retailers serve nearly 240,000 patients across the state. No caps exist on the number of licenses this state will award, and municipalities cannot enact zoning restrictions to prevent dispensaries from opening. Sounds a little bit like Oregon. Yeah.
Wow. See, I didn't know about the municipalities not being able to kind of like zone accordingly. But I guess my question to you is, do you think that it's okay? Like, what do you think about caps, license caps?
I
It's
think there
not a
should
free
be a fair
market.
market. I think there should be a fair market. I don't think that there should be
Yeah.
necessarily zoning any different than alcohol, right? So
Hmm.
being far away from a school and a park and all of these things is ridiculous coming from the same regulatory agency as liquor. So restricting it, I'm not a fan of. And even, in Eastern Washington, where a lot of wineries are at, they don't like the smell. That's what they're saying. I think there's a
Yeah.
competition for land use for vineyards. Washington State is the second highest seller outside of Sonoma in California. And so we sell a lot of wine, and the land here is ripe for that. A lot of good terroir to grow cannabis. So, yeah, I think there's going to be some battling between that and the people getting. So I love this quote that says, people are getting into cannabis because they think it's going to make instant riches, but the reality is it's competitive.
Yes. Yes. I feel like, I think if someone's trying to start a cannabis business, invest in a cannabis business, be part of the cannabis industry, is like, you have to know and look at the numbers, because you've got these bright eyes, this green rush, and like, you don't see a return on you don't see a quick return on your investment, especially if you have a cultivation site, even a manufacturing site, because you have so much capital that you have capex costs that you have to invest in, all of the structure, all of that. So yes, I don't think anyone's becoming a millionaire overnight in this space, or even over a few years. Like,
Oh, I
no.
think I made the analogy of Starbucks, right? And how they went out and
Mhm.
opened a bunch of stores. And so
Yeah.
this individual says that they don't mind running loss leaders every now and then to get people to buy their products. So those deals include $115 ounces. And then happy hour is $10 grams, buy one, get one half, or buy one, get one half off of edibles. We're not able to have those discounts or give free stuff away, but yeah, I mean, discounts and pricing and all of that is going to be detrimental. So to wrap up Oklahoma, they said that when they had their first small harvest, you could sell it for $3,000 a pound. Now they're hearing that if you're lucky to get 2,000, it's increasingly common for it to go for 1,000 or less, particularly if you're growing outdoors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is interesting though. I mean, just taking it back to like the finances, like, okay, so if you know that, probably if I'm going to start a business in Oklahoma, I better estimate that I'm going to be making 1,000 wholesale. And that's probably a good number. And let's like kind of take that number down. So how am I going to be more efficient? Then you just need to understand, like, what's the capacity? What's the market cap? What are my like fixed costs and my variable costs of just being in business? And that's how you make the decision if you want to be part of it. And I think that so many businesses forget just to think about it that way, where let's just look at the numbers, and do the numbers make sense? Like, why do you want to open it's like, why do you want to open up a cannabis shop when you could also open up a donut shop and perhaps even make more, right? Like, so I think that there is this aspect of, you need to be passionate about whatever you're doing. And so I do appreciate the altruistic business owner. I think I'm one of them. But you have to always be numbers focused, because you're just going to waste your time if you build a customer following and loyalty and you go out of business. Good kudos to the investors that swoop that up. But I think the first step is just to know if the numbers even make sense, and be realistic with the numbers. And then secondary, it's like, how do you actually achieve those numbers when you know that there's 240,000 patients and 2,000 dispensaries? You are fighting for somebody to come and buy your product a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's hard to differentiate right now because it's so early and so new. Not a lot of people really understand it. So it is about branding. It's about stupid numbers, like the highest THC at the lowest price point or whatever. So however people are able to build that brand, it's going to be some trial and error, because we haven't really seen anything like this since maybe over 100 years ago, with the automobile industry coming out of nowhere. Cannabis industry was medical prior to 1937. But I mean, that's a long time ago. So nobody really remembers that. We're doing this all over again. What's your crystal ball say before we wrap this up? What do you think is going to happen with the industry? You're in France. What's happening in your world? What's your bubble say?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. So I think that 2020, similar to 2019, but definitely more, will be the year of mergers and acquisitions. We will continue to see businesses that looked very, alluring and quote unquote profitable, merge with other businesses, change their model, or even just go out of business. I think that because 2020 is an election year, hopefully the cannabis will also help bring out the voter. And within that, in the United States, probably we'll see a few more come up. I'm excited to see, one of the clients that I helped in California was one of the cafes, the infused consumption lounge, right? And so they have yet to open their doors. And so I'm so excited to see how cannabis will be continuing to integrate into society. I hope that brands will continue to unite to almost build the cannabis brand in the face of cannabis, because to me, one of the biggest issues that is facing every state, especially, not especially, but definitely California as well, is that we're not having the dialogue with the non-cannabis curious. And we need to have that dialogue with the non-cannabis curious. So I just feel that it's going to be progression, but it's going to be definitely a consolidation in market. I don't have so much insight yet on Canada. I haven't really focused there. I think in Europe, I'm very excited to see what's going to happen. Like in France, I'm in Nice right now, there's 11 CBD stores. Interesting, they're getting their products from Italy, the Czech Republic. They said the United States. I don't know about that, but I've seen such interest in US brands, even some of the bigger brands, right? Like having facilities in Portugal and Germany. What is going to happen? I think that we're going to see movement, but we're not going to see quick movement, right? So we'll probably see a little bit more of the CBD play. Right now, I feel like Europe is 2014. That's how I feel. Like, it's exactly how I feel. And I was like, well, I've seen the future. So I'm excited to kind of make an impact there. And then I'm just, I'm focused on just helping entrepreneurs with making sure that they have a sound business. I'm launching a cannabis women's mastermind leadership group. I'm so excited because women still, we don't make as much as men with being a woman entrepreneur. There's not a lot of true training out there that focuses truly on being a really great leader and having that network. So I'm focused on that. And I'm just really excited to see how everything happens and expands.
Well, let me give you the opportunity to unpack that for a second. So Kalogia is a website. Where can people go to find it, and what is it? Explain that educational platform a little bit.
Oh, well, so if you want to find Kalogia, you just go www.kalogia.com. And, originally it started out as a networking platform for cannabis professionals. I started it in, I think, 2015. And then after looking and listening to all of the users of what do people need? Everyone needed education. And then being a CPA, having done consulting, I thought to myself, okay, I can't scale myself, except I can with online education. So the focus is, I have a profit accelerator to help businesses that are, actually starting and really looking at their numbers and being really sound with their numbers and looking more just into their numbers, but looking at the strategy behind their business. And then the women's mastermind, I'm so excited. I've never done this before. So I love facilitating. So I created a 9-month program to help women entrepreneurs really focus on building financial freedom for themselves. So right now, only 3%, and this is without cannabis, 3% of women entrepreneurs make $1 million or more. Just 3%. When you compare that to male entrepreneurs, it's significantly different. And so, using kind of my gift, I guess, with numbers and the group accountability, like in microfinancing, women are very successful with microfinancing because of group accountability. So using kind of mentorship, group accountability, and a keen focus on being okay with talking about numbers and being freaking okay with getting, the numbers that will make you financially free. I'm launching this, and I'm so excited because it's kind of like this quasi model of many things that I've done and wanted to do. And so we'll see. It's an experiment. And then, I got to get you on Cannabis Business Minds. So you can find all of that on Kalogia. So Cannabis Business Minds is my podcast. And I literally just launched season 4 yesterday and had my first episode, and it had been a year. So I'm happy to just get to hear everyone's story, because there's so much information in this space. And like we talked about at the very beginning of the show, it's hard to find the information, and it's overwhelming because sometimes there's so much information.
Yeah, I think people get overwhelmed. There's a lot of sole proprietors in this industry, and there's a couple women that I'd like to help out. I think they're going through founder syndrome right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's founder syndrome to me is creating your own roadblocks and putting distractions in your way and not being able to focus. So having a program like what you're talking about could get them to focus, could help hold them accountable, and to maybe be a little bit more, positive and not create false roadblocks.
Yeah.
Support.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, well, please tell them about it. I think that there's the group accountability, but then there's also being accountable to ourselves. And there's so many people that face, founder syndrome or imposter syndrome, or how can I do this syndrome? And yeah, I think what it is, it's joining other entrepreneurs and be like, you know what, that's bullshit. Mm-hmm. And I got to move past that, because the only way that I can attain the goals that I really want to attain is by moving past it.
Mm-hmm. So how can they get a hold of you if somebody's listening here in Europe or Asia or wherever they are, and they're interested in what you've got going on? How can people get a hold of you?
Well, they can get a hold of me on my LinkedIn. So it's LinkedIn, and then my username is Simone.cr. So Simone Cimiluca-Radzins. They can search me or go to my website, SimoneCR.com, or connect with me on Kalogia. I feel like I'm pretty easy, or they can shoot me an email, Simone@Kalogia.com. I'm just sometimes harder to send a message back to, but I definitely am excited.
And you're currently 9 hours ahead of Pacific Standard Time?
Yes.
Okay. So
yeah,
you're going to be late responding to people. So that's just because you're on the other side of the planet right now.
Yeah. I've been sending people these emails at probably 2 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm like, they probably think I'm crazy.
Well, all of that will be in the show notes. So with that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. I want to thank my guest, Simone Cimiluca-Radzins. She's with Kalogia. Appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.